Deterministic means if mom and dad get together and you get a child, that's what you get. That's your book of life. That's what you're going to be. If mom had bad cholesterol and you're one of those kids, you got bad cholesterol, you can't change it. Wrong. This is what we were taught in med school. It is wrong. Okay? True if you have, let's say, trisomy 21, Down syndrome, that's what you're stuck with. That's a gene switch change. You can't modify that. But everything else going on that potentially is high cholesterol, all these other things, we can modify that. And I'm going to talk a lot about that tonight. So this is just a cartoon I think is funny because the Jorgensens, you know, there's this amoebas and then you got the dinosaur and this kid's got a tail, so whatever. All right, I promise I'm not going to do a lot of hard science. Watson and Crick, DNA, unravels. Beauty of this whole thing is that the DNA as it's being read here, this is the book of life. And that book of life then goes on and produces proteins, and that's what does everything in our bodies. What's very interesting is when I was learning in medical school again, the DNA had these things called exons, which were this code that encoded for the protein, and in between these things called introns. Junk DNA. We were told it was junk. It's garbage. Who wants to tell me if God would put something there that was garbage? But we were taught this. It's junk. We don't need it. We're not using it. We're now proving that that's not true. This stuff is the information cycle that tells this to do what it's supposed to do or turn it off or on. So the way I like to explain this is, let me go here first. We'll skip this quickly, but protein functions, lots. If anyone wants this, I can give you later, but we don't need to belabor that. Places you can mess up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Amazing that our bodies do so many things right when there are so many places that it can go wrong. But this is where things like chemicals, all the stuff that happens to us in our body can actually get into the system and mess things up. All right, my favorite part. This is where, you know, I'm driving home in the car, I listen to this stuff, I get really excited, it's sort of scary, but epigenetics, new paradigm. We're going to talk about Randy Jourley and the Goody Mouse Project. We're going to talk about methylation in our diet. You guys are like, oh my God. Bisphenol A, opposite effect. Okay, epigenetics. What is it? Mendelian-wise, back in the day, you had your genes, and you had, you know, your book of life, and it was your book of life. It came from mom and dad, and that was it. It was determined, right? Okay. Epigenetics says there's a change to how that gene is played out, what comes out, but you don't do anything to the DNA sequence. So the book never gets rewritten. Does that make sense? The book is there, you're not rewriting the book, but you're actually changing how the book is read so what comes out. The analogy I like to use, which I'm actually stealing from Randy Jourley, is it's a computer, okay? You get a computer from Dell, and everyone gets the computer for Dell, and that computer is set up to do the way you wanted it. It's got all the programs already preloaded on it to do what you want. That's your computer. You can't change that, really. I mean, you can, but let's say for sake of argument, you can't change it. That's your book of life. That tells your body how to make a liver cell, how to make a heart cell, how to do anything. You take that heart cell out and you put it in a petri dish and you let that petri dish go, it'll turn into a heart cell because that book of life says go be a heart cell. Okay? Epigenetics, above the genome, is the software that goes into that hardware. Now you can put in all kinds of software to tell that book of life to, let's read you a different way. Let's play you a different way. Let's do this different. That's how you can change. And this is what I'm going to try and impress upon everyone really powerfully tonight. This is the key to us, responsibility-wise, changing how we end up in the world. It's not determined anymore. You're not screwed because your mom and dad had bad genes. You can change a lot of this stuff. We all make choices in life, some not so good. I've put these berries into piles according to which ones I believe are poison. Wow, I didn't know you could do that without actually eating them. Well, which is why I bring you here today. I mean, for centuries, people knew that ginger was good for them, but certain mushrooms were bad. How did they learn this stuff? I mean, trial and error, really. But interestingly enough, they realized that when they did take some of this stuff, bad things would happen. Epigenetic phenomenon, okay? It is complicated. For me to simplify this down to you guys, just realize that I'm really simplifying it down. And the guys doing the heavy lifting, the guys who actually help me regurgitate this stuff to you, this is how complicated it is. It's unbelievable how many factors and vitamins and minerals and everything that's involved in the cycles of life in our body. Hard to imagine. A Goody Mouse, the seminal case in teaching us that what we were taught was wrong, okay? The Goody Mouse is a mouse that is genetically predetermined, Mendelian-wise, to be this: fat, yellow, diabetic. Every time you take mom and dad, put them together, pregnant mom comes out with a fat, yellow, diabetic mouse. One day they did an experiment. They gave the mom a mouse when she was pregnant, folic acid, B12, vitamins, and choline. See what happens to the mice. The mouse came out brown, skinny, non-diabetic. If you believe Mendelian genetics, that's impossible. If you believe epigenetics, it's possible. What happened was, by giving a methyl group, which I'm going to explain a little bit, you actually changed how the book of life was read. Methylators essentially is you take a chromosome and it's unwinding to be read. If you put a methyl group on this thing, and don't worry about the details, what it does, it puts a don't read signal on that gene area. It says, don't read me, skip over me, move on to the next one. Don't read it. So if you have adequate methyl groups, in this case, the gene doesn't get read, you don't get the yellow diabetic mouse. Pretty interesting. All these things, acetylators, ubiquinators, these are all driven by foods, of all things. Foods tell our body what to do. Now let me spin this on its head a little. Dana Dolinoy, another great researcher, doing some work, took endocrine disruptors, chemicals that mimic estrogen, let's say. Bisphenol A. Everyone heard of bisphenol A? Plasticizers in the news, number 7 plastics taken out of baby bottles. Canada, Europe banned it. United States, we're still testing it. Banned now mostly because consumer-driven removal, not because the United States government did what we wanted to do. Nonetheless, it's coming out of our system. When they gave the bisphenol A to the agouti mouse, who wants to guess what happened to it? Fat, yellow, and diabetic. Why? It overcame the folic acid B12. Then they looked at it and said, well, what happens if you give more folic acid B12? Well, then it reverses the plasticizer. So now we're in a competition between food and chemicals to try and make our genes do what we want them to do. If you give too much bisphenol A to the body of a pregnant mama, don't care. You're not going to beat it. The baby's going to come out fat, yellow, and diabetic. So there's a balance here. And again, we're going back to nature. There's a balance. You want to limit as much as you can the things that are going to cause your body to read the book the wrong way. We want that book of life to be read the right way. Food, good. Chemicals, bad. Okay? One of the things that, when you look at this stuff that's very fascinating, chemicals are everywhere. We don't have any idea what half of these chemicals are doing to our bodies. And this is just one case now, and this is in a mouse. We have no idea what this does in a human. I'm extrapolating this data from from mice to humans and saying, this is probably what we're seeing in humans. This is all theoretical right now. But if it's me, I'm taking this theory and banking it and saying, I'm getting away from all this stuff as best I can. So in my house, I've literally removed plastics, don't cook in any plastics. I try and not drink out of plastic water bottles. I'm just saying, you know what, until they prove to me that all these other plastics that are out there are going to be healthy for me, not messing with it. And again, that's probably an extreme version. But until I get some data that makes me feel a little bit better about this, I'm saying, you know what, I'm taking the high road and going the other way. I'm going to try and be as natural as possible. I'm trying to go crazy, of course. If I'm on an airplane, fine, I'll drink the darn water bottle, 90-10. But, think. All right, so everyone loved the agouti mouse. Great mouse.